A man suspected of stabbing 3 people at Manchester Victoria Station has been detained under the Mental Health Act. Police say they are treating the attack as terrorism. NASA is celebrating the success of a mission to the most distant world ever explored in the solar system. Brazil's new far-right president Jair Bolsonaro has been sworn in, saying the country had been liberated from socialism and political correctness. A baby boy has been rescued from the rubble of a block of flats which was destroyed by an explosion in Russia. Also tonight, rail fare rises are taking effect despite the worst cancellations and delays in 17 years. And health officials say the average child eats the equivalent of 13 sugar cubes a day. That's 8 cubes too many. Police say a man arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a knife attack at a railway station in Manchester has been detained under the Mental Health Act. They're continuing to treat the attack last night as a terrorist incident. A man and a woman remain in hospital with multiple stab wounds. A police sergeant who was stabbed in the shoulder has been discharged. Members of the British Transport Police who tackled the knife men have been praised for their outstanding bravery. Danny Savage reports now from Manchester.
Although Manchester Victoria Station has now reopened, there's little doubt that what happened here just before 9 o'clock last night was terrifying for passengers who saw the attacks. A 25-year-old man was quickly arrested by British Transport Police. One witness said officers swarmed on the attacker within seconds after he began stabbing people on the platform. A BBC journalist, Sam Clack, saw the man wielding a knife and witnessed the arrest.
I heard the man say, as long as you keep bombing these countries, this sort of stuff, and I'm using a cleaner term, if this sort of stuff happens, then this is going to keep happening. This is why he's got pepper spray coming down his face, and while the police are trying to pin him on the ground and he's trying to get up.
As the suspect was put into a police van, he was heard to shout, "God is greatest," in Arabic. The couple attacked last night are both in their 50s and live in the area. They are expected to remain in hospital for some time. The woman has a serious injury to her forehead. Tonight, police say the 25-year-old suspect has been assessed by specialist medical staff and detained under the Mental Health Act. But the counter-terrorism investigation remains ongoing. The Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police is Ian Hopkins.
We are treating this as a terrorist investigation, which is being led by counter-terrorism officers with support from Greater Manchester Police. We're working to piece together the details of what happened and to identify the man who was arrested. Our work will continue to ensure we get to the full facts of what happened and why it took place.
Police have also been searching a semi-detached family home in the Cheetham Hill area of Manchester. Officers are now guarding the property. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, has tried to reassure people.
From what I do know, it has all the hallmarks and appears to be an isolated incident. While I would stress that people do need to remain vigilant, they should nevertheless not be unduly alarmed and should continue to go about their daily business.
The BBC understands the security services are assisting police with this investigation, and counter-terrorism officers believe the location of the attack may be a factor too. Victoria Station is adjacent to the Manchester Arena, where a suicide bomber killed 22 people in 2017.
An unmanned NASA spacecraft has made contact with Earth, having successfully flown by the most distant object ever explored in our solar system. The New Horizons probe took huge numbers of photos and other measurements during its encounter with Ultima Thule, an icy world some 4 billion miles away. Researchers hope the information will offer new insights into how planets were formed. As our science correspondent Jonathan Amos reports, the success of the mission was confirmed when NASA detected a radio signal from New Horizons.
We have a healthy spacecraft. We've just accomplished the most distant flyby.
That's it. A phone call from the far side of the solar system. Alice Bowman, New Horizons Mission Operations Manager, or MOM as she's affectionately known, confirmed the contact. The probe had survived its far-flung encounter and had a databank full of pictures. New Horizons had been commanded to make an extremely close pass of a mountain-sized ball of ice and dust wandering far beyond the planets. Scientists believe Ultima Thule's frozen state could provide new insights into how the whole solar system came into being billions of years ago. The great distance involved made the flyby technically very challenging, but Chief Scientist Alan Stern said his colleagues had triumphed.
All these projects in spaceflight require enormous attention to detail and really smart and dedicated people, and this project's no exception. This team spent 3.5 years working its tail off to really make sure that this would go by the book, and from everything we can tell, they scored a 100 on the test.
New Horizons has begun to send back its images, but they'll come in dribs and drabs. Data rates from the probe's 15-watt transmitter are very slow. It'll be late next year before they're all back on the ground.
The new president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, has been sworn in and has promised to free his country from crime, corruption, socialism and political correctness. He's the country's first far-right leader since the end of military rule in 1985. Our South America correspondent Katie Watson reports from the capital, Brasilia, where crowds gathered as Mr. Bolsonaro travelled to the ceremony in an open-top Rolls-Royce escorted by cavalry.
Thousands of Bolsonaro's fans descended on Congress to witness their president take power. Dressed in green, blue and yellow, the colours of the Brazilian flag, they shouted support for the man they call a legend, a leader they say will change the fate of the country.
We see in his character someone who really loves Brazil. He hates corruption. His feeling for people, it's amazing. That's what captures our hearts. We are feeling so blessed to see what God has done to Brazil. It's a new time. We like Brazilians are so happy and blessed.
It's a hope for Brazil after 13 years of a very corrupt government in Brazil. So now we have a hope that with Bolsonaro we will clean up all the bad politics that used to run in Brazil.
Mr. Bolsonaro told world leaders he'd do politics differently and get Brazil's struggling economy growing again.
I am here today in front of the nation as the people start to break free from socialism, the inversion of values, the bloated state and political correctness.
But while those in the crowd in Brasilia are hopeful, many millions fear his conservative politics and aggressive rhetoric, especially towards minority groups, will only make the lives of poorer and more vulnerable Brazilians much worse. Mr. Bolsonaro certainly marks a new political direction for Brazil, but how the country will fare is uncertain.
Rescue workers in Russia have pulled an 11-month-old baby boy alive from the rubble of a block of flats which collapsed on Monday. At least 9 people died and dozens are missing after an explosion partially destroyed the 10-story building in the city of Magnitogorsk, 1,000 miles east of Moscow. Officials have blamed a gas leak. Our Moscow correspondent Sarah Rainsford has sent this report.
Russian rescuers are calling this a New Year miracle. It's the moment they reached baby Ivan, clinging to life beneath the rubble of his home. He'd lain trapped and injured for over 30 hours. The emergency team shouts to hurry as the baby boy is bundled off to hospital with multiple fractures and frostbite. Pyotr Gritsenko describes how they'd found him by following his cries. The baby calmed down as soon as the team reached him, he says. He was protected a little from the bitter cold by his mattress and a blanket. The New Year's Eve blast destroyed almost 50 flats. At first, officials suspected a gas leak. Tonight, investigators denied reports that traces of explosives had been found in the ruins, but said that all theories were being considered. At the local hospital, baby Ivan's mother described how she'd been sleeping as the blast hit. My baby was beside me in his cot, she says. She lost him when the building collapsed, plunging her and an older son into the street. At the disaster scene, rescue work is continuing through a second freezing night, with dozens of people still missing. 11-month-old Ivan, though, has been given a chance. Airlifted for treatment to Moscow now, as doctors say his condition is serious but stable.
Rail fares in England and Wales will rise by an average of more than 3% today. In Scotland, they'll increase on average by just under 3%. Passenger groups have criticised the government for not freezing some fares after considerable disruption in parts of the country last year. The Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, is setting out plans which could allow more than 1 million teenagers to benefit from cut-price travel later this year. Our transport correspondent, Tom Burridge, now reports.
An annual season ticket from Bradford to Leeds has gone up by £32. From Reading into London, it's an extra £140. One passenger group said the 3% increase showed a disregard for commuters, who received what it described as an atrocious service in 2018. Figures last month show that cancellations and long delays have risen to their highest level for 17 years. The rail industry says 98 pence of every pound spent on a ticket is invested back into the railways. But the RMT union described the railways as a grossly mismanaged rip-off. Meanwhile, the government says 16 and 17-year-olds will be entitled to 50% off all fares when a new rail card launches in September.
A man has died after being stabbed in the West End of London during the New Year celebrations. 3 other people, 2 men and a woman, were wounded in the early morning incident outside a property in Mayfair. There have been no arrests and police are appealing for witnesses. Tom Horrigan reports.
The attack happened at around 5:30 outside a venue on Park Lane where a private party was taking place. Officers believe a group of men tried to force their way into the event, stabbing 3 male security staff in the process. One of them, believed to be in his early 30s, died at the scene, while 2 others, aged 29 and 37, were injured. A woman who tried to help the security team close the doors was also hurt. Detectives said it was a shocking incident in a particularly busy area of London as people made their way home from other New Year parties. They added that there were many other witnesses they needed to speak to about what happened, some of whom may have filmed the attack on their phones.
Public Health England says that by the time they turn 10, children have on average already eaten more sugar than the recommended maximum for an 18-year-old. The agency is encouraging families to make simple changes in their diets to cut down on sugar. Here's our health and science correspondent, James Gallagher.
Children are on average eating the equivalent of 13 cubes of sugar a day, often in drinks, cakes, biscuits and breakfast cereals. Public Health England says that is 8 cubes a day too many. On average, 18 years' worth of sugar, an entire childhood's worth, is being devoured before a child's 10th birthday. Too much sugar rots our teeth. Public Health England says a child has a tooth removed in hospital every 10 minutes, and that an overly sweet diet also increases the risk of long-term conditions, including type 2 diabetes, obesity and some cancers. However, its Change for Life campaign says small changes can make a dramatic difference. Swapping sugary drinks, cereals and yogurts for healthier ones could save up to 7 cubes of sugar a day. Public Health England argues the food industry must take responsibility as well as parents, and said it was working with manufacturers to cut the amount of sugar in children's favourites by next year.
The family of an American citizen who was arrested in Russia last week on suspicion of spying have insisted he is innocent. They say Paul Whelan was in Moscow for a wedding. Russia's Domestic Security Service, the FSB, says it's opened a criminal case against him, but no further details have been given. From Washington, Gary O'Donoghue reports.
Paul Whelan's family said they'd learned of his detention from news reports and were deeply concerned for his safety and well-being. The statement said Mr. Whelan was a former Marine who now worked in corporate security for a US company making car parts. According to the family, he was in the Russian capital to attend the wedding of a fellow Marine. On Monday, the Russian authorities said they detained Mr. Whelan, who is 48, at the end of last week while he was engaged in an act of espionage. It's not clear whether US diplomats have been able to visit him yet. If convicted, he could face more than 10 years in prison. The arrest comes just weeks after a Russian national, Maria Butina, pleaded guilty to acting as a foreign agent and attempting to influence the American electoral process. Russia sees her detention as politically motivated.
Police in Western Germany have arrested a 50-year-old man suspected of driving his car into a group of people celebrating the New Year in the city of Bottrop. At least 4 pedestrians, including Syrian and Afghan nationals, were severely injured in what the authorities believe could have been a xenophobic attack. Police say the man made racist comments as he was detained and may be mentally ill. Prince Charles has attended a service of remembrance on the Isle of Lewis to mark the 100th anniversary of one of the UK's worst peacetime disasters at sea. More than 200 men returning home after the end of the First World War died in the early hours of New Year's Day 1919 when the Iolaire hit a reef and sank just yards from the shore. Our correspondent in Inverness, Ian McInnes, sent this report.
It was a tragedy which changed the Western Isles, remembered 100 years on with a mixture of military pomp and traditional worship. A psalm to honour the 201 men lost barely a mile from Stornoway harbour and the safety of home. 79 people survived, more than half of them were helped ashore by John Finlay MacLeod. He swam to land through the violent seas with a rope and created a rescue line for his comrades. He described in 1973 what was going through his mind at the time.
Just keep yourself afloat and watch out for the waves and don't take the first one, the second, but watch the third one, but it's always the highest. And started hollering to the people about to come one by one.
For many years, the disaster wasn't spoken about, as local historian Katrina Dunn explains.
It has been described as the crowning sorrow of the war. It was just an unspeakable grief, but these commemorations are bringing it to people's attentions again, and I think we are mourning again people we never knew.
At today's service overlooking the site of the tragedy, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and Prince Charles joined descendants of those on board the Iolaire.
Now, thus says the Lord, He who created you, O Jacob.
The ceremony was the last in a series of events to remember a tragedy that affected every village on the Isle of Lewis, but which was largely forgotten outside the Western Isles.
Insurers have been called in to assess the damage at a self-storage warehouse in South London, which was destroyed in a huge fire last night. Almost 1,200 units had been rented out at the site in Croydon. Some customers say they've lost all their possessions. From Croydon, Greg Mackenzie reports.
At the height of the blaze at the self-storage units last night, up to 120 firefighters were tackling it. As daylight broke, the damage was plain to see for the people who had gathered in front of the police cordons, having cut short their New Year's Eve celebrations to find out what had happened to their belongings stored inside. Many were visibly devastated, including this man who runs a business restoring vintage pinball machines.
I'm more concerned about all the stock that's gone, which we're talking pinball machines from the 60s and 70s, and I don't think I'll ever be able to replace them. I heard about it last night at a party, and that's me over. That's my business gone. That's it.
More than 12 hours after the alarm was first raised, the building had been reduced to a shell, still pumping out black and white smoke. The owners, Shore Guard, say it's highly unlikely customers will be able to salvage anything. An investigation into the cause of the fire is underway.
Prosecutors in France say 14 migrants have been caught trying to steal a fishing trawler in the Channel port of Boulogne. The group, including a mother with 2 children, said they were from Iraq. It's the latest in a series of incidents in which migrants have attempted to steal a vessel to make the crossing to Britain. The Archbishop of Canterbury has urged people to show openness towards each other in 2019, after what he described as the struggles and divisions of recent years. In his New Year's address, Justin Welby said that society needed to gather around common values, while acknowledging it would be difficult work. Here's our religion editor, Martin Bashir.
Recorded at Lambeth Palace just before the parliamentary recess, Archbishop Justin Welby described a nation that is struggling to disagree well. The Christian response, he said, was to look to Jesus, who chose community over conflict, and that we should do the same in 2019.
We disagree on many things,
Turn on the television, read the news, and you see a lot that could tempt you to despair. Hope lies in our capacity to approach this new year in a spirit of openness towards each other. That will involve choosing to see ourselves as neighbours, as fellow citizens, as communities, each with something to contribute.
Although he did not mention the political challenges that lie ahead, he acknowledged that overcoming divisions will not be easy, but said that engaging in this difficult work will bring blessing upon the nation.
A single ticket holder in the UK has won almost £115 million in tonight's Euro Millions draw, making them the country's fourth biggest lottery winner. Another 10 players won £1 million each. The biggest Euro Millions winner so far in the UK were Colin and Chris Ware from North Ayrshire, who won £161 million in 2011. Sport, Tottenham secured a comprehensive win at Cardiff City to go second in the Premier League. Russia is facing the possibility of new sanctions after missing a deadline to hand over information on doping. With a full roundup, here's Nick Hatton.
3 goals inside 30 first-half minutes put Tottenham in control as they ran out comfortable winners in Cardiff.
The ball hits Kane. Oh, bumps off his knee and rolls into the bottom corner. Eriksson has a chance on the edge of the box on his right foot, shoots low, finds the bottom corner. Inside the penalty area, Son finds the bottom corner. So Kane, Eriksson and Son have now all scored in the first half at Cardiff. Cardiff look beaten already. Cardiff 0, Tottenham 3.
Yes, 3-0 the final score. Harry Kane, Christian Eriksen and Son Heung-min all on the score sheet to lift Spurs back up to second in the Premier League table. They're a point clear of Manchester City, 6 adrift of leaders Liverpool. So does manager Mauricio Pochettino feel his side deserved to be called title contenders.
I think with all our tools, we are competing very well. But they are the real contenders. We are like intruders, no? Intruders.
Yes, yeah.
That no one knows how, but we are there.
Arsenal moved to within 2 points of fourth place Chelsea as they won 4-1 at home to Fulham. Alexandre Lacazette and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang among 4 different goal scorers for the Gunners. The Fulham boss Claudio Ranieri, though, felt his side were more than in the game.
We managed very well Arsenal. Of course, we had to improve. And I think this match can say to us, hey, look, we play well, but you make this mistake. We have to do this better because it's much important when you play against everybody.
Leicester City made it 3 wins out of 4 as Jamie Vardy's second half goal gave them a 1-0 win at Everton. It lifts them up to 7th in the table. For Everton, it's a 4th defeat in 5 games for Marco Silva's side.
Even the simple pass, 1-2 meters we lost, and we missed these simple things in football, pass well and mobility. And when you don't do that, of course it's impossible. After come the creativity, the mobility in our squad to create chance to score.
The Leicester manager Claude Puel felt his side got what they deserved from the game.
It's a good reward, fantastic. We deserve it, I think, this result. Of course, it's always difficult. It was a tough game because it was not a fantastic game about the control of the ball, about the technique, because we play in a busy period, a lot of games, a lot of play, opponent and us with a lot of tiredness. But the most important thing is to keep always this spirit, this togetherness in all situations.
Sheffield United's Billy Sharp has become the leading goal scorer in English League football this century. Sharp scored his 220th as his hometown club beat Wigan 3-0 in the Championship.
Proud. If I could have played for Sheffield United all my career, then I'd love to, but it wasn't to be. I come back at a good time in my career. I was fit, hungry and had something to prove, and I wanted to make sure I was a hit at Sheffield United. Obviously, when I was younger, didn't go quite to plan, but enjoying every single minute I'm playing at the minute.
You can find all of yesterday's results on the BBC Sport website. The president of the World Anti-Doping Agency, Sir Craig Reedy, says he's bitterly disappointed after it was confirmed that Russia's anti-doping agency missed the deadline to hand over data from its Moscow laboratory. Russia was set a 31st of December deadline to comply, but WADA's inspection team were denied full access to samples. Russia could now be at risk of another ban from international events after a state-sponsored doping scandal. Roger Federer emerged triumphant from an historic first meeting with Serena Williams in the Hopman Cup as his Switzerland team beat Williams' USA in the mixed doubles to secure a 2-1 win in the round-robin tie. So, how did Federer find facing Williams?
Well, I was nervous returning because
because you just don't know. People talk about our surf so much, and I see why it is such a wonderful surf, because you just can't read it. You don't see until the very...
I can't read yours either.
Well, we have the same qualities, you know, but yours is a bit better.
To horse racing, where jockey Charlie Deutsch claimed his first Cheltenham triumph since being released from prison, as ASO won the handicap chase at the New Year's Day meeting. The 22-year-old rider returned to action in November after serving part of a 10-month jail sentence for dangerous driving while over the limit and escaping police custody. Top-weight ASO justified the 3-5 favouritism for trainer Venetia Williams and helped Deutsch put a painful 2018 behind him.
I didn't know what to expect, to be honest, but I just tried to treat it as it always was before the incident, and just carry on as I was and see what would happen, really. And luckily Venetia's been supporting me brilliantly, and the horses are coming into form, so it's just everything you want.
Michael van Gerwen has won his third PDC World Championship darts title. The Dutchman was a 7-3 winner over Michael Smith at Alexandra Palace. And British skier Dave Riding equalled his and his country's best Alpine World Cup result by finishing second in the parallel slalom in Oslo.
Nick Hatton. Now, our look at the front pages of the morning papers. And the increase in rail fares from today makes the lead for the Telegraph and the Eye, which has the headline, "The £1 a mile rail journey." In an article for the Telegraph, the Transport Secretary Chris Grayling says it's clear that improving the most congested network in Europe is not easy, and the disruption of last year was unacceptable. The Times reports that young women who are sent abroad by their families for forced marriages are charged by the Foreign Office for the cost of rescuing them. According to the paper, British victims who call for help are told they have to find hundreds of pounds for their flight home, basic food and shelter. The Express leads on NHS England figures showing that patients failed to attend more than 15 million GP appointments last year. It says the no-shows caused chaos in clogged surgeries and cost the NHS £216 million. The Guardian says experts have warned that desperate local councils are being ripped off as private housing providers take advantage of the growing homeless population. It says latest figures reveal that spending on temporary accommodation by local authorities in England has soared to almost £1 billion. If you have a passion for murder mystery, a thing about Tarzan, or you love the slapstick films of Charlie Chaplin, then New Year's Day was particularly special. That's because those works and thousands of others 20th century classics fell out of copyright in the United States, which means they can now be broadcast, performed or printed without fear of legal action. As Angus Crawford reports, it's the biggest such release of works for public use in America for 2 decades.
What could the blood and thunder biblical epic, The Ten Commandments, possibly have in common with...
Yes, we have no banana.
A song about fruit, which topped the US hit parade for 5 weeks, or even more unlikely with...
Morning, Jeeves, I said.
The most famous of fictional English aristocrats and his quick-thinking manservant.
A most amazing cove, Jeeves.
The answer is simple. They were all created in 1923, and from midnight last night in the US, copyright on all of them expired, which means they can now be broadcast, streamed, performed, posted or printed without asking anyone for permission. That would have happened in 1999, but a change in US law extended copyright for another 20 years. Important works now free for public use include those by Agatha Christie, Edgar Rice Burroughs and the poet Robert Frost. Professor Jennifer Jenkins is an expert on US copyright law.
In 21 years, this is the first time on January 1st that any published works have entered the public domain in the United States for 21 years. So we're going to party like it's 1998. That's the last time any published works went into the public domain. So we're extremely excited.
And it's the gift that just keeps giving. Next year, it'll be Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And in 2024, the first adventures of the most famous rodent in history, Mickey Mouse.
The headlines again. Police in Manchester have said that a man suspected of stabbing 3 people has been detained under the Mental Health Act. A counter-terrorism investigation is continuing. A NASA spacecraft has successfully flown past the most distant object ever explored in our solar system and begun sending information about it back to Earth. The far-right populist Jair Bolsonaro has been sworn in as the new president of Brazil. An increase in rail fares of around 3% on average comes into effect today in England, Wales and Scotland. BBC News.
Read by Neil Nunes. In a moment on BBC Radio 4, the Book of the Week, Stephen Hawking's Brief Answers to the Big Questions. Tonight he considers our two fundamental belief systems. Is it to be religion or science? Well, you'll hear that after a brief answer to the big question. How's the weather shaping up a day into 2019? Here to tell us, Louise Lear.
Good morning, everybody. Well, colder but sunnier is the best way to describe it, which in some ways is quite nice because it was a rather bland, mild, cloudy, miserable kind of Christmas, wasn't it, really, in terms of the weather? But yesterday, New Year's Day, we actually had 5.6 hours of sunshine in Leaming, North Yorkshire. That was because a cold front has swept through. It has introduced some colder air, so only 3 degrees was our daytime maximum in Shetland. By contrast, the cold front took a while to clear south, and it's still doing so. So West Sussex, Shoreham in West Sussex, was the highest day maximum, still with 12 degrees, but still it was pretty cloudy. Now that cold front is moving through as we speak. So for the second day of January, it looks likely that we're going to really notice the difference with the weather. We start off cold and frosty, particularly away from North Sea facing coast. Here, overnight lows are likely to drop down to around -3 or -4 degrees, but there will be some beautiful winter sunshine on offer. Now, a northerly breeze will always just drag in a little more cloud off the North Sea, and that could run the risk of a few isolated showers today, particularly down through the East Anglian coast along the Kent coastline as well. But temperatures generally peaking at around 3 to 7 degrees, so a noticeably colder feel. Now, as we move out of the 2nd of January, Wednesday, I'll get my days right in a minute. When we move out of Wednesday into Thursday, clear skies will continue, and actually it's going to turn pretty cold again. In fact, a widespread frost is expected as we head into Thursday. But again, we will see some beautiful spells of sunshine coming through. Now, we still keep that northerly feed, so always the risk along that East Yorkshire coast, East Anglia and the southeast, of a little more in the way of cloud. And at the same time, we pick up a little bit more of a southwesterly feed. So along west-facing coast, here a little bit more cloud as well. But come further inland, dry, sunny and crisp. And it's a similar story as we move into Friday. That's your weather.
Thank you, Louise.